when you're in the midst of a challenge or a struggle or like a big emotion, it's so hard to pull yourself out of it enough to really like get some perspective. But it's important, and like you said, with the meditation practice, you cultivate that ability to have that pause, the pause that gives you the space to choose something different than the typical reaction that you might have without that pause.
Sara, welcome to the Book Thinkers Life-Changing Books podcast. I'm excited to chat with you today, and I wanted to start with something that you wrote on page 30 of your book. You talked about your first hypnotherapy appointment,
Mm.
and I want to bring you back to that moment, and I'd like to have you kind of tell us, what did that feel like? Why did you pursue that appointment? What did you know about hypnotherapy at the time? And what was the outcome of that first experience?
Sure. I didn't know much about it, really. I had just heard stories from my mom in particular. She had used hypnosis twice, I think, in two different scenarios. One was around quitting smoking, which, you know, who knows how many years later, she's still not a smoker, so that's good. Um, but that was the thing that really worked for her. She had tried so many different ways to quit smoking, and that was the thing that worked. And then the second uh, avenue that she went down to pursue hypnosis was weight loss. And that was a little bit of a deeper dive, I would say, with things that were happening from her past and her beliefs and that sort of thing, versus just the visualization aspect of being a non-smoker and sort of the affirmations and the suggestions that she used for the working through quitting smoking. So that's really all I knew about it. And of course, what most people think about when they think of hypnosis is the stage hypnosis. So I was familiar with that as well, but um, that's really all I knew. And I think I was experiencing some typical stress of being a 30-year-old business owner and mom of two kids and not really knowing what I was doing with my life. So that's really what drove me to hypnosis initially was I just wanted a different way to get to know myself and understand what I was going through. Um, yeah, so that was my first experience.
What was the actual experience like? So you sit down, you answer some deep questions, maybe questions that you hadn't previously thought of before, did some reflections, and then what happens? I mean, what happens during
Yeah,
a session like that?
sure. Well, my first experience was a traditional guided hypnosis process. So it was super relaxing, and I felt like I could have potentially been sleeping, but I don't think I really was. And it really was just a extremely calming, relaxing experience where I was guided through a journey, if you will, which is a little different than the approach that I take today, but similar state of being, state of mind, if you will. But yeah, it was just really, really relaxing. The woman's voice was very calming and nurturing and soothing, and I just remember feeling very safe and comfortable with her. Um, yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, well, it sounds beautiful. I'll share my first experience with it soon. But before I do,
I'm on the edge of
Sara,
my seat.
yeah, I've lived in this world of personal development, helping people solve problems and build skills, more resilient minds, change perspectives, things like that. I've lived in this personal development universe, I guess you could call it, for the last 10 years or so, maybe a little less. And I feel like hypnotherapy, hypnosis is not typically prescribed. It's not typically written about. It's not the first thing you think of when you think of self-help. And so why aren't more people leaning towards this modality as a way to overcome the stresses of being a 30-year-old business owner like you did?
That's a good question. I think it's really a lack of understanding of hypnosis and hypnotherapy. Honestly, I think that people use it without knowing that they're using it.
Mm.
It's not labeled that way. And that's just the modality that I was first introduced to. And so that's how I went into the training. And that's really sort of the foundation of my education in this personal development world. But I think that even coaches that guide people through like a meditative process, or they guide someone through just an exploration of their past or their limiting beliefs that are more on the subconscious level, all of that is really using hypnosis without saying it's using hypnosis.
Yeah, you have a quote that I highlighted on page 37. I'll read it from my other screen. It says, "In truth, we've all experienced a trance-like state without any outside help from a hypnotherapist. If you've ever allowed a parent, teacher, peer, politician, religious leader, news outlet, or social media channel or account to suggest a thought, which we're all guilty of, mindset, action, or concept to you, you've experienced a very mild form of hypnosis." And so that's interesting. Social media, mindlessly scrolling on social media is a form of hypnosis. Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit more about what that means?
Well, I often use the example of driving home from somewhere that you've driven home from, thousands of times, and you pull up to your destination and you're like, wait a second, I don't remember those last three turns I took. And obviously you were safely driving and you just did it sort of out of habit and memory, and that's essentially a trance-like state, right? You did what you needed to do. You were conscious, but you were somewhere else. You were not in a fully alert state of consciousness. So that's a form of hypnosis in a way. And I don't know if you've experienced this. I sure have. I'll scroll. I actually have a timer set of my social media so that I don't do this, but time just like disappears. And then you're like, oh my gosh, where did the last 10 minutes go? I was just on Instagram for 10 minutes. I don't think I got anything of value out of that 10 minutes, but I was there, you know? And then you find yourself repeating something that you saw, or thinking about an ad that came up on Instagram or someone's post that you just it's just sort of embedded there.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. Going back a little bit to your book, You Are Not Broken. Tell us, when did you decide to write this? Who is the
Mm.
target reader for the book? And how has the book been received so far?
Well, I decided to write it a while ago, actually. It took a long time for me to get through the whole writing process and editing process. But I would say maybe 3 years ago, I had been working in my hypnotherapy practice for a while and seeing some really great results with clients. And I just, every time I have an appointment, I'm so inspired by people's effort and their commitment to whatever transformation that they're trying to work through. I mean, every single time I'm amazed. And it's not a service that I have the ability to offer to everyone, obviously, and it's not a service that everyone can afford to partake in. And so I thought there's got to be a better way to allow people to go through this process and support them without having to spend 2 hours with as many people as I can. And so originally I thought I would do a course, but then I thought, I I really just want to work through this in a book and give it to as many people as possible, and let them go through the process on their own and see what they can uncover and shift in their own lives on their own. So that was the motivation behind the book. And so far, it's been pretty well received. I'm just doing kind of organic marketing at this point and trying to put the word out to the audience that we've developed on YouTube and anyone else that is willing to listen, I guess.
I'm sure we'll mention the size of your audience during the introduction, but for those that skipped through the introduction, tell everybody a little bit about the community you've developed on YouTube because it's
Sure.
very impressive.
Sure. Well, thank you. Um, it it's been a number of years. I think it's almost 8 at this point. And I honestly started it by the recommendation of my, at the time, 10-year-old son, who said, "You just need to put your stuff on YouTube, and then you can share it with your clients more easily." So I had no intention of it being what it is, but it was well received when I started putting recordings on YouTube. And so I just kept doing it. And since then, I think we're close to 900,000 or just over, somewhere in that vicinity. Um, and it's really rewarding to read through the comments and see that what I'm offering is helping people. So I always
Yeah,
love that.
that deserves a little pat on the back right there. That's amazing.
Well, thank you.
For those in the audience that are, and we'll go a little bit deeper into hypnotherapy and maybe some of the things somebody in the audience might be facing that hypnotherapy can help
Mm.
them solve in just a minute. But for those that are already like, wow, I'm very impressed with Sara, I'd love to work with you individually. What do you perform hypnotherapy virtually? And if so, what's that pricing structure look like? And oftentimes, how many sessions do people typically do with you?
Sure, that's a good question. I do offer sessions virtually. I think that actually works really well because the the client, the person who's going through this process, can be in their own home or in their office or somewhere that they feel safe and comfortable, and that makes a really big difference in terms of the depth of hypnosis and the willingness to explore the subconscious mind and what might be contributing to whatever the issue at hand is. So that's done virtually, and often the the initial package that I offer is it starts with a 2 hour uh, appointment, 2 hour session, and in that session we would talk a lot about background information, some potentially childhood upbringing, things that are contributing to whatever the issue at hand is, how it shows up in their life. And then we would go through the process of the hypnotherapy. And that is a conversational style of hypnosis where you're in a relaxed state of hypnosis, or you could consider it a meditative state. And in that state, you're able to, I don't say shut off the conscious logical mind, but it's almost like that part of your mind is resting and you're bypassing it to
Hmm.
access more the emotional and the subconscious mind. And that's where our beliefs about ourselves are held. That's where past experiences are held. A lot of people believe that there's like lots of different younger versions of ourselves in our subconscious mind, and that's what we're really trying to work with in the hypnosis. So that happens in the second half of our time together, and then beyond that, you would get a personalized recording that is based on the beliefs that you do want to have. It's based on the qualities that you want to embody, and that you think will help you to be the version of you that you want to be, help you to live the life that you want to live. Right. So that recording is designed to reinforce all the things that you do want in your life. It's creating familiarity, it's creating the repetition of these ideas so that they just are you.
Yeah, that's amazing. So,
Yeah.
do you mind sharing? And I understand price point is a moment in time, and so this is subject to change, everybody. But what does that initial 2 hour consult plus the
Sure.
personalized recording go for?
Yes. So that package, which does also include a follow-up session after, you've listened to the recording for a little while, currently is 549 for that package. And then after that, what I usually recommend is for people, if they want to keep continuing with the work, is they already have the initial session with me. We've already, you know, dug deep into past background, so I don't need quite as long of a time to work with someone. Beyond that, we just do our 75-minute sessions. And unless you need another recording, you just do a coaching package after that.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I have somebody in my life who I'm going to maybe gift this for. So I'm going to have a
Oh.
conversation with her, and I think it'd be really interesting. I was sharing with you before. I've had some experiences, I would say, with forms of hypnosis over time. I mean, I
Hmm.
started meditating about 10 years ago, every single day. I started with guided meditations, which I would guess are a mild form of hypnosis. And then I
Hmm.
would work up to some longer form meditations. Most of it I would do by myself. Even at one point, I did float tanks, so sensory
Mm.
deprivation float tank experiences, and I did 1 hour every week for 20 weeks straight, which was really fun. Um,
Wow.
but from there, I worked with a couple of different mindset coaches that would put me through long form virtual guided hypnosis sessions. And
Hmm.
then more recently, and I wouldn't have classified this as hypnosis, but now I definitely would. About a year and a half ago, I was at a client workshop and they brought in a past life regression
Mm.
expert. And in hindsight, it was a form of hypnosis. It was guided. It was about an hour and a half long. It was extremely vivid. And I was totally, uh, it was totally hypnosis. So just really fun to kind of think back to how vivid those experiences were,
Yeah.
because of the guided process.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I'm curious, what did you find in terms of results or your experience with whether it was the past life or any of the other forms of hypnosis you experienced?
The past life piece, I was the most skeptical of. And kind of still am. Probably more so than anybody in that room that day. There were about 20 people going through the workshop.
Okay.
And I had the most vivid experience visually and emotionally out of anybody in the room. So I was
Wow.
kind of flirting
As
on this
as
line
the
of
skeptic.
yeah, I was like, I'm open to the experience, but I'm a little
Hmm.
skeptical.
Hmm.
And I mean, at the risk of sounding too crazy for my audience, which is never a bad thing, I had this there was probably like a 30-minute kind of intro visualization piece to the meditation or the process where you're walking down these steps and you interact with this light in the center of the room. And once you move through that, I was kind of transported back visually to this, you could call it like 1500s, 1600s English countryside kind of cabin outside of a castle. And I lived an entire day. I felt what that person was feeling. It was really interesting. And
Yeah.
nobody else in the room had an experience anywhere close to that, but that's what I felt. And
Mm.
yeah, it was really eye-opening.
I love that. Yeah. I don't have a ton of experience with past life work, but I find it very fascinating and curious. But I think that it's just a sign that your imagination, your subconscious is just a very vivid, um, you have vivid images that come up. So I think that probably any form of hypnosis would serve you well.
Yeah, that's how I think about it too.
Yeah.
Active imagination. And in fact, I was going through your book and I went through the lemon experiment
Oh
or the
yeah.
lemon, whatever you'd call it, kind of little fun, I don't know, exercise. That's the term.
Yeah,
Would you mind doing that for everybody in the audience today to get a little
sure.
preview for what the mind is capable of doing?
Sure. Well, I would call it is an exercise for sure. It's also a suggestibility test. So it gives you a little bit of insight as to, um, I mean, everyone is suggestible in some amount, some capacity. But the one that you're describing, the or referring to, the lemon, is really just to close your eyes and imagine a lemon, right? You think about all the different aspects of a lemon. You think about the smell, perhaps the texture of the skin or the rind. Maybe you imagine the smell when you slice into a lemon. As my mouth starts watering as I'm describing it, you might have a similar experience. Um, and then if you would imagine, putting a slice of lemon in your mouth and biting down, what happens, the physiological experience that is evoked through that process, right? You don't actually have a lemon in front of you, but it evokes a similar response for
Yeah,
most people.
as you talk about this, my like cheeks are puckering up and my mouth is salivating and
Right.
I'm definitely suggestible. That's for sure.
Yeah, and there's lots of different forms of suggestibility tests to test out, what your mind is capable of creating in your physical body.
So how does that provide context for you as a therapist? So
Mhm.
we do that test, my cheeks are puckering, they're still puckering, and like I can taste and smell the lemon. What does that tell
Yeah.
you about my ability to do the work?
Yeah. Well, it tells me that this form of therapy, or this form of personal development, can be very supportive for you, right? I wouldn't say that there's people out there that can't be hypnotized. I think that there's levels or tiers, if you will, right? And the folks that are very like artistic or creative minded are often will often have a more vivid experience like what you described, versus someone who is very like analytical or logical, like leaning more towards the logic than the creative and imagination. They may have a different experience. It may be less vivid imagery, and it may just be more thought like experiences. So it's all just different layers, different levels, different experiences from one person to another.
Yeah, and I think that people can change over time too, because I would have said 10 years ago that I was not creative, artistic,
Mm.
visual, that I was more analytical, black and white. And
Hmm.
I was almost I was in a little bit of a fixed mindset as it relates to those subjects, and I was almost like holding on to a limiting belief in a way.
Hmm.
And as I've immersed myself in this world of personal development, I've definitely learned that things like creativity and imagination and the ability to be artistic, those are learned skills in a lot of ways. And so sometimes it's just
Absolutely.
removing the limiting belief, or sometimes it's practicing and developing a different area of your brain or your life. And
Mm.
so, maybe 10 years ago I would have said, I don't see, taste, or smell a lemon. And now I'm like, I could still taste it, you know?
Well, I would also offer that the resistance that someone has towards the suggestibility test, if we just use that as an example, that resistance it's something to work with as well. It's
Hmm.
something to consider. Like, what is it doing for you? What is that resistance? How is it serving you? And oftentimes, it's some form of protection. right? Like I don't want to do hypnosis because I don't want to see what I see, right? Or I don't want to learn whatever's going to come up in hypnosis. And that resistance is a way to protect someone, whether they know it consciously or not.
Yeah.
So,
That's interesting.
yeah,
Another concept that I wanted to ask you about from your
sure.
book, You Are Not Broken. I thought this was really interesting. It was in the introduction. You talked about the idea that all humans are self-correcting.
Mm,
That's a little bit of a new concept for me, at least in that phrasing. Can you expand on that a
interesting.
little bit? All humans are
Yeah,
self-correcting.
yeah. In the way that I approach that idea, it 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 facilitates my approach as a coach and as a hypnotherapist because everything I do is client led or client centered. So even though I'm the guide and I am helping to facilitate the process, you as a client, or if you were my client, you have the answers. You are the expert in you. I am not. And so my job is to help you to find the answers, help you to see what it is that you're seeking. I will often say, when people come to hypnotherapy or they come to a coaching experience, it's like they're trying to see themselves with their nose pressed up against a mirror. And my job is to pull the mirror
Mm.
away so that you can see from a different perspective. So that's how I approach that idea, is that I think everyone has the answers that they're seeking. And if you can slow down, be silent or be still, and see the protective strategies like the resistance for what it is, once it can be recognized, it can potentially be let go of. You can find a different way to meet that need, or you can recognize that the resistance as a protective strategy isn't needed anymore, right? Let's say that resistance started when you were 12 and you were being rejected by your peer group, and so you resisted being yourself, or you resisted you know putting yourself out there. If you're not 12 anymore and you're not in that quote threat of rejection from your peer group, you don't need that protective strategy anymore. So when you can look more clearly, then you can let go of that strategy or find a different way to meet the need.
Yeah, whenever I talk about meditation and people ask me what are the benefits that you've received from
Mm.
meditating 10 years straight, I talk about emotional intelligence, maybe more time to process logically and not react emotionally, but I also talk about that objective kind of, I love the metaphor of the mirror. You're trying to pull back so you can see the full
Yeah.
picture. And I oftentimes view myself from outside of the house, sitting there meditating, and in an emotional situation or in a frustrating situation, sometimes I'll try to zoom out to the entire earth because that helps create so much distance that it allows the emotion to pass through me. And I've found that very useful. So it's interesting to hear
Mhm.
you use a similar metaphor for some of the benefits of doing this work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you're in the midst of a challenge or a struggle or like a big emotion, it's so hard to pull yourself out of it enough to really like get some perspective. But it's important, and like you said, with the meditation practice, you cultivate that ability to have that pause, the pause that gives you the space to choose something different than the typical reaction that you might have without that pause.
Yeah. Well said.
Right.
Okay, I have one final subject I'd like to ask about, and then we'll
Okay.
start to wrap things up. I think the I think some of the resistance from a lot of the people in our audience that are very logical and business minded when they hear something like hypnotherapy, and by the way, if you're that type of person and you're still listening, kudos to you. But some of that resistance might be around like there's no science there, right? That's
Mm,
not logical. And one of the things I really enjoyed about the beginning of your book is you just went right at it. You're like, no, 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 no. There's a lot of scientific evidence to support what I'm teaching and what I practice and what
yeah.
we're going to talk about in this book. So how is hypnosis and how is hypnotherapy rooted in science? That's my question.
Mm, yeah. Well, it's definitely been studied for many, many years. And it's interesting that you asked that because at the beginning of the process of writing the book, I almost wanted to not use the term or the idea of hypnotherapy because I think if I wrote this whole book with the word meditation, it would be
Mm,
received very differently, even though it's a similar state of mind, and really a lot of the more recent research and science has been around meditation and the benefits of meditation. So you can find much more about that than you can about the science of hypnosis and the state of hypnosis. But I think hypnosis was studied long in the United States in particular, long before meditation was. Um, there's research done around using the hypnotic state with like the placebo effect around I can't remember the exact uh, it wasn't really a research study, it was just an anecdotal offering about using the placebo effect with morphine with soldiers that were
mm,
um, having procedures done when they didn't have morphine. They were just doing it, telling them that they were getting morphine, and that is essentially the same thing, right? It's a suggestion. We're suggesting that we're giving you morphine even though we're not. Um, yeah, I don't think I could offer the exact scientific studies, but it's definitely been studied for over 100 years at least.
And there's more
Yeah,
coming, and that's the
yeah.
point too. So it's rooted in science. There's a good
Hmm.
foundation. It works, and there's more coming. And I love, yeah. And you're totally right about. It's funny to think about the term meditation, but it's more palatable today than it was 5 years ago, and certainly more
Sure.
palatable today than it was 10 years ago. And my guess is that hypnotherapy and hypnosis will kind of follow that same trajectory over time.
Yeah, yeah. I hope so. I think it's very useful. Um, you know, if somebody doesn't like the term hypnotherapy and they're resistant to it, what the way that I practice, at least, it could be looked at as just like, let's take away the the visuals. Let's just close our eyes and see what we can know without looking around, right? What can you know about yourself by just closing your eyes and slowing down a little? That's what I would offer to someone that's like a little hesitant or skeptical. Just try that. Close your eyes and see what you can notice.
Hmm.
It's a good
Yeah,
first step.
it is. Two final questions and we'll let you go. So the first is this. Where can people go to learn more about you, inquire about your services, maybe sign up for that 2 hour consultation or get a copy of the book? What's the best place?
The mindfulmovement.com is my main website, or on YouTube you can just search the mindful movement and there's hundreds and hundreds of videos that will come up.
Okay, perfect. We'll make sure
Yeah,
that's linked in the show notes as well as a link to your book directly as well.
sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, here's the final question. If the book was deleted, and your
Hmm.
YouTube channel was deleted, but you could leave the world with one simple message related to hypnosis, hypnotherapy, or the idea of you are not broken. What would
Hmm.
that message be?
Hmm. Well, at first I was going to say the invitation that I offered to close your eyes and see what you can notice. But I do think you are not broken is a message that I would love to offer to anyone who is willing to listen to it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Sara,
Yeah.
thank you so much for the conversation today. It was a lot of fun reading through your book, going through some of the exercises, thinking about the questions that were posed in there. And I'm excited to lean into this subject a little bit more.
Well, thank you very much for having me.